care and food away from millions of women to fund tax breaks for the wealthy. The impacts are devastating. And we know that the impacts will hit everyone, but it's very important to note that it's going to hit women in a big way. 16 million people would lose their health care. Costs would rise for millions more. This bill attacks Medicaid, which covers 25 million women. These are working moms. They are caregivers like Katina, who we will hear from shortly, who cares for her parents. Students earning their degree or credential for a new job, grandmothers in long-term care. And nearly half of all children are covered by Medicaid. Children like Charlie, who got to take his first plane ride to get here, got his wings, everything, who require help with medical care, specialized therapies, and assistive devices. So many moms are caregivers for their kids, and we're going to hear from Nancy, who's Charlie's mom today. Unsurprisingly, congressional Republicans are targeting reproductive health care in particular. Their bill bars Affordable Care Act insurance plans from providing reproductive care and would defund Planned Parenthood, which is going to be a subject of another spotlight hearing that we're going to have on the anniversary of Dobbs, led by our colleague Senator Murray on the Senate side. We're already seeing the impact in my own state. 4 Planned Parenthood health centers are closing. Women are already losing access to life-saving health care and family planning services. In addition, the bill will increase grocery costs for millions of Americans, disproportionately hurting women who make up more than 60% of SNAP participants. In fact, about 4 in 10 single moms receive SNAP. Many of these moms are caregivers. Others, like Felecia, work but need help making ends meet. And we're going to hear about that today. When we should be lowering costs, and this is why a whole bunch of people, I think, who voted for President Trump, they thought, well, maybe a lower cost. They're getting the opposite. The bill leaves 22 million children behind because their family income is not high enough to fully qualify for the child tax credit, and this bill places new bureaucratic burdens on families trying to get their earned income tax credit. It also increases costs for essentials like energy bills, mortgages, car loans, and education. On top of all that, there's the $2,500 per family Trump tariff tax, which is raising food prices by more than $200 a year and increasing the prices of baby products and things like strollers by 20 to 30%. Families are already struggling to make ends meet, and this big betrayal makes it even worse. So in the last few months, I've visited 47 rural counties in my state. I've heard from parents, seniors, veterans, farmers, small business owners, and I know our colleagues up here have done the same. And the way they see it, when you talk to regular people, and I wish the president would be here today to hear this, I wish our Republican colleagues would be holding hearings like this, because then maybe they would be willing to stand up, because all it takes is 4 Republicans in the House or 4 Republicans in the Senate to stand up to this bill. And then if they heard from people like we have, they would know that doing this on the backs of everyday Americans just to fund tax cuts for the rich at the price of 0.1%, top 0.1%, over $400,000 in tax cuts is the wrong thing to do. So we can't wait to hear from you today so we can spread the word about what this bill means, and it is time for them to stand up as well. And we're excited to have our House leaders here, and with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Clark.
Thank you so much, Senator. We appreciate you hosting us here today, and more than that, we appreciate your leadership on all of these issues. And I am so grateful to be here with many of our House and Senate leaders who will be coming through, but to start us off with Teresa Leger Fernandez from New Mexico and Jill Takuda from Hawaii. We're really grateful to have you both here. And thank you to our guests for being here today. To Shalanda and Jocelyn, welcome back. We are always pleased to have you on the campus. And to Nancy and Felecia and to Katina, thank you for taking the time and Charlie, we're not going to forget Charlie, the star of the show here, for traveling to the Capitol, for sharing your stories and making your voices heard on behalf of families across the country. So as we'll hear from our witnesses, women in this country are not asking for the moon. They are just people trying to get by. And whether they're taking care of their kids or their parents or both, whether they're in early stages of their careers or they're in that final sprint to retirement, every day, women in this country are fighting uphill against a system that underpays them, overworks them, and overcharges them for the basics. Republicans are looking at this system, and all they can say is, why aren't these women having more babies? Then they shrug like this is a mystery. When the GOP then goes out and proceeds to make it worse. And that's certainly the story of the last 6 months. Cuts to childcare, cuts to public schools, tariffs on strollers and car seats and diapers and toys, price hikes on eggs, bananas, and baby formula, an economy that is so saturated with chaos that families can't predict what will happen tomorrow, let alone have the confidence to take out a mortgage or start a business. And now, one of the most shameless attacks yet, the big ugly bill. The big ugly bill that puts a target squarely on the backs of women, especially women of color. And Republicans are so hell-bent on cutting taxes for their rich donors, they are choosing to make life harder, more expensive, and more dangerous for America's 170 million women and girls. All to help. 170 million women, all to help 900 billionaires. That's the formula. Some of the richest, most powerful people to ever live. People who don't need and won't notice these tax breaks. At a time when most American families, 60% of American families, cannot afford the basics. Republicans want to lift the cost of those basics even further out of reach, taking food assistance away from 2 million children, kicking 16 million Americans off of their health coverage, cutting Medicaid, cutting Medicare, raising premiums for ACA plans, blocking children from enrolling in the Children's Health Insurance Program by drowning their parents in red tape. They're even keeping the neediest families from getting the full child tax credit. I mean, come on, what are we doing here? They are deeming 20 million children ineligible for help because their parents make too little. That's not a mistake, because their parents make too little. In Republican eyes, all of these programs are disposable. Keeping kids fed, keeping families healthy. In their eyes, the money is better spent filling the pockets of billionaires. And if it ended there, this legislation would already be a uniquely vile attack on women. But in a triumph of cruelty, it goes even further. This bill also goes after private health coverage. It shuts down local health clinics, not because it will save money, but because there is a vendetta against Planned Parenthood. So in addition to forcing a massive wealth transfer from the working class to the billionaire class, this bill would flat out ban abortion coverage from ACA insurance plans. It threatens to shut down nearly 600 health centers, predominantly in rural areas where people do not have any other healthcare options. It would take away cancer screenings, birth control, prenatal care, postpartum services for millions of patients, all in service of this one thing that Republicans want even more than tax breaks for billionaires, a nationwide abortion ban. And if this bill becomes law, the cost will fall on women who are working hard to get by and hoping they can get ahead. Americans who have a right to be healthy, a right to pursue the life they aspire to, a right to be confident in their future and to be confident in the future for their children. I recently heard from a constituent back in my district whose name is Minerva, a mom who depends on SNAP to feed 3 little ones. Here's what she wrote to me. Quote, I ask for mercy on behalf of all the single moms trying their best to raise their kids. Where is the mercy? Where is the compassion in this bill? And as Senator Klobuchar pointed out, it would only take a handful of Republicans to stop all of this. And I hope the stories we will hear today will give them pause and make clear just how much is at stake for American women. So I thank you again for joining us, and I yield back to Senator Klobuchar.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Leader Clark. And we're excited about the witnesses. I was thinking about how we just need those 4 to stand up. We've been joined by Senator Cortez Masto. I was thinking of the objections. We have a group of Republicans in the Senate who have said that the Medicaid cuts are, in fact, one of them said was immoral. Then we have a group that is kind of a la Elon Musk, concerned about the debt, but then won't say we should do anything about reversing the tax cuts on the wealthy. And then my favorite group comes out of your house, and that is the Oops Caucus, who says, oops, we didn't really read the bill. So anyway, they seem to be divided, but there does seem to be mounting concern as we move forward. So I'm going to introduce our witnesses here. We have Shalanda Young, who's a loved in this room and in many other places. I remember when she was nominated for the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, where she served so well as expert on budget and tax. I remember how many Republicans supported her in our chamber and how many of them were fans of the work that she did when she was in that job. And then I keep thinking of what you must be just shaking your head at what is going on right now in terms of our budget, in terms of the tax policy. She is now a distinguished scholar in residence at the Tax Law Center at NYU Law, and we're just so grateful that you came to share your thoughts with us. Jocelyn Frye is with us. She's the president of the National Partnership for Women and Families and a champion for economic justice, affordable health care, and reproductive freedom. Katina Moss joins us from Richmond. She didn't have as far to go as the other guests. Katina is an educator, small business owner, and caregiver to her parents. Thanks to the Affordable Care Act and Virginia's decision to, Virginia, as in the state of Virginia's decision to expand Medicaid, she has access, Katina does, to health care while she cares for her parents. Felecia Smith is a bus monitor who transports students to a school for the blind in Kansas City. She is the mom of 4 and counts on SNAP to put food on the table, especially during the summer when school is out and finding enough work becomes a challenge. Her story is the story of so many, and we appreciate you coming forward to tell it. Nancy Baker Curtis, as has been mentioned, is with us, with Charlie at her side from Grimes, Iowa, a place I've been for some reason. She is a teacher and a mom, of course, of Charlie. Charlie relies on Medicaid for medical care, specialized therapies, assistive devices like a wheelchair, and transportation assistance. So thank you all for being here, and we'll start with you, Ms. Young.
Thank you so much, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Cortez Masto, Whip Clark, Representative Dingell, other senators and members. Thank you for having me here to talk about the impacts of the Republican budget that was passed by the House and now being considered in the Senate. I've had the chance to work with many of you over the years as the former director of the Office of Management and Budget, as a longtime staffer on the House Appropriations Committee. One of the highlights of that time was the work done to expand the child tax credit in seeing the dramatic and meaningful results of that expansion around the country. In 2021, a new Democratic president and congressional majority expanded the CTC to families with young children. Families with young kids up to age 5 receive fully refundable credits of $3,600 per child, and families with older children receive $3,000 per child. When we say fully refundable, that means families with some of the lowest incomes were able to receive those full credits. Full refundability meant a significant expansion to homes of single mothers with lower incomes who often cannot qualify for the child tax credit. Overall, the CTC lifted 2.9 million children out of poverty in 2021, including 1 million children under the age of 6 and 1.9 million children aged 6 to 17. We know what works, and we know what a Congress determined to help families make ends meet can do for the American people. That's not what's happening in the Republican budget bill. Rather than build on the historic decline in poverty from the 2021 expansion, the Republican budget bill includes some of the most damaging cuts to basic needs programs that we have ever seen. Nonpartisan analysis has shown 16 million people will stand to lose their health care. The Republican budget will abandon efforts to expand the child tax credit to help working families, something we saw just in 2021 reduce child poverty in half. As many as 20 million children, as Whip Clark pointed out, in working families will not have access to the full $2,500 credit in this Republican bill. Most of them will get $0 extra dollars from that expansion. If you are a married couple with 2 children that makes $400,000, you'd be eligible for the full $2,500 credit for each of your children, so up to $5,000, or $5,000 in total under this bill. A mom of 2 making $16,000 would get less than half of that much, just $2,025. That is unfair and wrong. The bill would go on to cut $300 billion from SNAP, according to the nonpartisan CBO. No matter what anybody says about waste, fraud, and abuse, that cut takes food from children, seniors, and people with disabilities. More than 2 million children would see their food assistance terminated or cut substantially under this bill. This bill expands work requirements, which are really meant, as we all know, to overwhelm people out of the system, to parents with children over age 6, and to older adults age 55 to 64. I hope we can all agree that hunger does not become less dire for a 7-year-old whose parents can't clear the red tape of new requirements. The Republican bill also proposes to reduce the federal contribution to state SNAP programs, shifting costs to states, which is expected to lead to deep cuts to food assistance that will reduce or end food assistance for 1.3 million people and could result in some states opting out totally from the SNAP program. CBO also says this policy would cut school lunches and breakfasts, impacting 420,000 kids, increasing their risk of hunger. Then there is the Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC. The Republican budget bill would require families to pre-certify each of their children each year if they claim them for the credit. More than 17 million families, every single one that utilizes EITC, will have to pre-certify. Every last family will be affected by this new requirement. And by the way, the agency who has to run this pre-certification is being gutted by DOGE. They can't do it. The requirement for additional paperwork will likely deter families from EITC as they learn about and navigate an entirely new process. There is no similar regime for large tax breaks for high-income people and businesses, even though they contribute disproportionately to the tax gap. Senators and members of Congress, thank you for holding this important conversation. Frankly, it's overwhelming hearing. Some people don't believe this bill does all of this, all to partially pay for tax cuts for the wealthy. I say partially because this bill takes a final swipe at the future of our children by adding $2.4 trillion to deficits. You know, I'm another mother of a Charlie, of a 3.5-year-old Charlie. I could be a lot of places today, but I'm here for the Charlie down the dais and for my 3.5-year-old. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for pointing out what really are fatal flaws in a bill that's making its way through, and I hope we can do better.
Very good, thank you. And now, Ms. Frye, thank you for being here. And we've also been joined by Senator Murray.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar and Senator Cortez Masto, Whip Clark, Rep. Dingell in her absence, and the other members who are here. Thank you so much for convening this hearing or forum. Thank you for inviting me to appear on behalf of the National Partnership for Women and Families. And I appreciate the opportunity just to talk about the real harms posed by the bill that's currently pending before the Senate. The bill would fund enormous tax cuts by stripping away protections that are critical to the health and well-being of millions of families across the country. I'm going to focus on really the harms to women who are really going to bear the brunt of this bill. And I'll say at the outset that we know that women are the backbone and often the linchpin in their families. They're the ones who control, oversee, direct the care in their families. They're the ones who are focused on the overall well-being of their households. The reconciliation bill has what amounts to cuts in Medicaid, Medicare, and the ACA marketplaces, all of which are vital to women's health. There's an estimated 24 million women who participate in Medicaid. 1/3 of them are mothers. More than half of them, nearly 13 million, are women of color. The measures included in the bill would result in people being cut from Medicaid, and that'd be devastating for all of those women at every juncture of their lives. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. First, from just a reproductive health standpoint, the House bill would make it harder for women to control their own bodies. We all know that's a design, and really to determine whether or not, when and if they have children. It would leave a little over 1 million without access to birth control, abortion, other forms of reproductive health care, through a provision that's intended quite intentionally to defund Planned Parenthood and close up to 200 clinics across the country. For women who do become pregnant, Medicaid is the nation's largest payer of maternal health. It covers 2 out of every 5 babies born in this country. In some states, as you well know, it is higher in a majority. And the funding cuts would jeopardize the health insurance and safety of more than 13 million women of reproductive health age, risking deepening a crisis that we already have around maternal health. And if you look at the numbers for Black women, Black moms, and Latinas, those numbers are even higher in terms of how much Medicaid funds in terms of the number of babies born. This bill also hurts women who are raising families. Nearly 8 million moms and 37 million kids are covered under Medicaid. In fact, in past years, if you look at the data over time, roughly about 75% of the folks who are on Medicaid are adult women and children. So these cuts have enormous effect. Some of the folks who have advocated the House bill, as you well know, have employed what I think can only be characterized as a really demeaning narrative about folks who receive Medicaid, to question their work ethic, argue that people don't deserve it or they don't need it. This narrative, it's disrespectful, it's dishonest, and it's disconnected from reality. The vast majority of Medicaid recipients, most mothers on Medicaid, already work. Among those who don't work, of which is a small percentage, only a small percentage of those are considered able to work. Many of those folks are older women. They're people who either have disability themselves, they've dropped out of the workforce, or they are caring for somebody. Imposing work requirements on these folks often does not increase the number of recipients who are working. What it really does, because of the onerous burdens in terms of paperwork and confusion, is that it just leaves people to lose their coverage entirely. Our other witness already spoke about, Medicaid and SNAP provide an essential infrastructure for families. The loss of these supports would be devastating. They're also unprecedented. And I have to say, the bill does really little to invest in people and working people. And we know that moms increasingly are critical to the economic stability of their families. For example, millions of people need access to things like paid leave, including moms. And what we find is that instead of having real paid leave, there's a tax credit in this bill that just gives money to companies. That makes no sense. So we're really incredibly pleased that you are holding this conversation. The National Partnership is more than willing to work with all of you to really hold the line and really do right by women and families in this country. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Katina Moss, and I am one of the 629,000 Virginians who have health care thanks to Medicaid expansion. Protecting Medicaid is a women's rights issue. As a mother, daughter, and grandmother, I have many people who rely on me to care for them, and Medicaid helps make that possible. A few years ago, from a tumor in her spinal cord, within 12 days, my mother had 3 spinal cord surgeries. As the self-employed child in my family, I had the most flexibility in my schedule to support my father as a primary caregiver to my mother. Daughters like me would easily make that choice again because we love our moms and we would do anything for them. But the reality was I had to give up income to care for her, to keep a flexible schedule for caregiving, and to maintain my own wellness as a caregiver. I have worked in roles that pay far less than an average income, considering my education and experience. Whether I am caring for my parents or sharing in the family team who support my daughter and her husband in childcare for my grandson, I am there for my family. And thanks to Virginia's decision to expand Medicaid, my health care plan is there for me. With Medicaid, I can access the health care I need and deserve. This in turn means I am healthy enough to fulfill my own duties as a caregiver. But right now, Republicans are looking to take away my health care. The reconciliation bill includes provisions that are designed to throw people off their health care and to make them pay more for it. That would mean I, along with hundreds of thousands of Virginians, would be at risk of losing Medicaid. We would also be forced to come up with $35 copays for certain services. And let's be very clear. The purpose of these cuts to Medicaid, which would be the largest in our nation's history, is to fund tax breaks for billionaires. And some Republicans say these cuts do not go far enough. As the Senate prepares to make changes to this big, ugly bill, I want to put a face to the harm these cuts could cause. Women like me rely on Medicaid for our health care. And the people who rely on us for care want the program to be strengthened, not cut. Over 1 million women are enrolled in Medicaid in Virginia, including over 320,000 through our Medicaid expansion program. Nationally, most women enrolled in Medicaid are either working or have caregiving responsibilities. In my case, both. More and more Americans are feeling the burden of high healthcare costs, and this bill would only make things worse. That is why I am proud to lend my voice in strong opposition to any cuts to Medicaid, especially when used to line the pockets of the ultra-wealthy. Thank you again for this opportunity. And I also wish to thank my Congresswoman in Richmond, Jennifer McClellan, for staying up for 26 hours to fight these cuts as they advance through the House Energy and Commerce Committee. It means so much to know that my health care, that everyone's health care, is worth this fight.
Excellent. Really good. Thanks. Ms. Smith.
I want to start off by thanking you for inviting me to come to testify today. My name is Felecia Smith. I am a single mom of 4 who are ages 21, 17, 12, and 11. I would like to tell you my story on how SNAP benefit has helped me. Sorry.
Go ahead. You're doing good.
When I had my oldest daughter 21 years ago, I was working 3 jobs. One job alone, I had to pay childcare. Another one to pay food, and which wasn't enough, and one to pay the bills, and I still struggled a lot. Moving forward, I am now working a full-time job as a bus monitor, and I'm a driver who transports students to specialized schools in Kansas City. I have been employed at the school district for 15 years, and like many other school district employees, my hours are reduced during the summer and then in August when there is no hours. I am currently working towards becoming a bus driver to increase my hourly wage during the school year, with the summer months remaining a challenge. As an employee of the school district, I only get paid once a month. By the time I get my bills paid, I have nothing left to pay for food and other basic needs. If it wasn't for SNAP benefits, I wouldn't be able to feed my children nor myself. Without this program, I would have to find another job and not be able to see my children or give them the attention that they need during these important teen and preteen years. The SNAP program has been a lifetime for me and my family. Being on SNAP allows my children to be enrolled in the school lunch program. SNAP doesn't cover our entire grocery bill, and we do run out of benefits by the end of the month. When we run out of benefits, we go to the Flint Hills Breadbasket to help us cover the gap between our benefits and our benefits are replenished. While I do my best to make ends meet to be sure that my kids have enough to eat, it is stressful wondering from one week to the next if we will have enough food to put on the table, and knowing that I can't give my kids some of the extras that I know that they might want. The reason I wanted to be here today to share my story is because I wanted to know that asking recipients to work through more red tape and to be eligible for the SNAP benefits. It is less money in my paycheck when I have to sit in an office, spend time on the phone, or upload a bunch of documents to meet new program requirements. We are not buying junk food or lobster with benefits. We are trying to stretch our benefits and eat the best food possibly can without a budget. I work, pay my bills, and like every other mom, I want to be sure that I have enough food to put on the table. Finally, I am a hardworking person who is looking to improve my economic situation, while at the same time being the best mom I can be. I don't deserve to be penalized because I am in a job that doesn't pay well or because I need food assistance. I just need to hang up so I can continue my path to meet my goals of getting a better paying job and making sure that I am there for my kids. To me, the program has helped me so much. Please, let's protect this program, and thank you so much for listening to my statement.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I was listening to you. One, people are entrusting their kids to you. Two, you're willing to share the story, and it's a story so many other people maybe wouldn't want to come and share what you did. And three, thanks for being such a good mom.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Curtis.
Good afternoon, and I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I want to thank you for your service to your constituents and to our great nation. Thank you for being able to share Charlie's story, and as Senator Klobuchar mentioned earlier, he flew on a plane for the very first time so that he could be here today. Charlie does not speak, so I'm going to speak on behalf of him, and I'm going to share with you Charlie's story, which begins in 2015. He was my second child, and he was born via planned C-section. It wasn't until his first pediatric checkup at 6 days old that we discovered that he had hypothermia, and eventually we would learn that he had suspected bacterial meningitis. He'd spend 30 days in the hospital, and when we were discharged, we left that hospital with the mantra of moving forward, thinking this was it. All of this stuff was behind us. But it wasn't. Charlie did not meet major developmental milestones, and soon he could not crawl, he could not swallow, he wouldn't roll over, and he did not speak. So I applied for Medicaid in June of 2018, and we waited. We waited 3 years, 8 months, and 6 days in order to receive services. During that time, our life was chaotic and we lived in limbo. Charlie was not old enough to attend school and no daycare would take him. So I became his full-time, unpaid care coordinator, case manager, advocate. I was his mom. Before Medicaid, every single year, we would hit our private insurance's out-of-pocket maximum. We could not afford his regular therapies, and we knew he desperately needed them. We would chase grants, write to nonprofits. We would just hope someone would help us get the equipment that we knew he needed, whether it be a gait trainer, a walker, or specialized feeding equipment. I don't know how, but somehow we made it work. We finally got Charlie a wheelchair. We got him that walker. We got therapy that didn't stop after 30 visits. 30 visits does not cover 4 months' worth of therapy for us. It is because of Medicaid, Charlie, who just recently began walking, is able to run across the playground and play with his friends. Charlie will soon be 10. He continues to have a pediatric feeding and swallowing disorder, and he still does not speak with words, but he knows how to spell his name. He knows his numbers 0 through 20. He knows his colors, and he's beginning to communicate with a communication device. He is making real progress, and that is a result of Medicaid. We have 2 insurances, a primary and a secondary. Our secondary insurance is Medicaid. But I'm going to be honest with you. Medicaid is the backbone of the care that Charlie receives. Private insurance covers a combined 30 occupational and physical therapy visits a year. 30 visits, less than 4 months worth of care for just 2 therapies. What are we going to do the rest of this year? Iowa's Medicaid program has a service called in-home daycare, along with respite and case management. This is all under our health and disability waiver. And this has allowed me to return to work in a public school as a public school teacher. It's also made it possible for Charlie to attend his local community public school because he has the proper supports he needs, like access to a health associate and nurse, seizure training for his staff, and school-based therapies like physical therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy. I'd be lying if I told you that I'm not scared. We're in the process of moving to the intellectual disability waiver, and we're absolutely terrified about what these federal funding cuts could mean for our family. If they go through, Charlie, he could lose everything, and we have fought for years to get these services. I've worked really hard as the president of the ARC of Iowa to share our story with elected officials. I've attended town halls with Senator Grassley. I couldn't get 5 minutes with him so that he would meet my son, so that he would know his name, Charles William Curtis, a boy who can now spell his name, who can walk, who's learning to feed himself, and all of this has been made possible because of Medicaid. When people talk about Medicaid being an entitlement, you'll have to forgive me, but I snark. I think, oh yes, I'm so entitled that I get to take my son to therapy 4 days a week. Or I'm so entitled that I get to spend sleepless nights going through stacks of paperwork, looking for bills and denials. The hoops that we get to jump through just so that I can give Charlie access to basic health care. When I hear that some of our elected officials are suggesting that we're all just going to die someday, and that I should stop being so concerned about these budget cuts, I'm filled with rage. They're asking me to ignore my son's very most basic well-being and needs. And as his mother, I can't do that. This should not be a political issue. This is a human issue. And I am here today to be the voice of Charlie and millions of children who cannot speak. We are willing to work with anyone, with any letter next to their name, across any aisle, who is willing to protect a program that has given my son not just the chance to survive, but to actually thrive. So thank you so very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, and thanks for the example you set for all of us to not give up right now. So thank you. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank all my colleagues here. But most importantly, thank you, all of you. Every day I get up, I'm outraged. It just is unbelievable to me that we have an administration and some of our colleagues who ignore what's going on in this country. And they're passing policy, whether it's the tariffs or this reconciliation package, that I believe penalizes the very poor and traps them in a cycle of poverty so that we can transfer wealth to the very wealthy in this country. I do not know how the country does not see that and are just as outraged. And I think our goal here is, and thank you for being here, is to highlight that, to make sure the American public understands, because you're not alone. You're not alone. There are so many people, I know in my state, in Nevada, that are dealing with the same issues, care about the same things, and women in this country, there is a sisterhood on so many issues that we deal with on a regular basis. But the policies of this administration really just do not care. And I'm frustrated. I am frustrated by that. And so let me start with one of the things that, at the end of the day, I think we need to shine a light on and we have to do more of, which is this idea that this administration and some of our Republican colleagues feel it is okay to put further red tape and burdens in front of people who are already working to make them eligible for some of these programs. Now, it's one thing to take away health care for the rest of this country and just be blatant about it. We're just going to take it away. It is another then to add additional steps and burdens and red tape for individuals who are already working and eligible to make it harder for them to get access to this Medicaid, to health care. Because what you are essentially doing is telling the rest of the country, well, you may be working now, we don't really care. We got to find dollars somewhere for these billionaires. So we're going to make it harder. You're entitled to investment tax credit, right? IETC. But we're going to make you now pre-certify. We're going to make you jump for more hoops. Now, I don't know about all of you, but I know Ms. Smith, you don't have time to fill out more paperwork to prove that you're working one job, let alone 4, take care of your 4 kids. But they're going to make it harder for you because they'd rather you fall off the system instead of paying you the Medicaid. But here's the cycle that it causes, is because if, God forbid, your health care goes, or your children's health care goes, particularly yours, you're not going to be able to go to work. You're going to lose that job, and then you're not going to be working. So it doesn't make sense to me. And Ms. Young, I'm going to ask you this because I'm so frustrated at the end of the day, because there is a difference between good public policy, and we saw it when we passed the American Rescue Plan. We saw it when we passed bipartisan infrastructure and inflation reduction. And the focus was, how do we lift up the American public? How do we ensure that the middle class has those breaks? How do we ensure that we're doing right by them and creating jobs and growing the economy and giving them an opportunity to succeed? But that's not what these policies do. That's not what this reconciliation package is all about. It's just the opposite. And I know you have a history of focused on budgeting, and I don't want to put you in the hairs of everything here because there's a lot of fear and retribution, but we just need some common sense talking about what is happening here for the American public to understand.
Well, Senator, first you have to have an understanding of whose back this country was built on and who drives this country, and it's working families and the middle class. So if that's not your belief, if you believe trickle down somehow works and the data shows it did not, then this is the kind of bill you're going to end up with. If you believe working families to get a ladder to the middle class, or the middle class allow them to strengthen their income, need a little help in this country, then you do policies like the 2021 child tax credit. And it wasn't just the level of credit, it was the full refundability. So making sure single mothers who make $16,000, $17,000, $18,000 a year can actually qualify for those tax credits. And it was sending money out monthly. Because guess what? Bills don't wait till the end of the year. That part of the development of that program, I think, made a vast difference. But I just have to take a step back. You won't ever get to that policy if you believe the billionaires and hundreds of millionaires are the driving force behind this country. And that just has to be the premise behind how this bill was developed. Because it doesn't make sense that parents with $400,000 salary get $5,000 in a tax credit, and a single mom making $16,000 with 2 kids would get less than half of that.
And you're right, and you touched on it. Do the billionaires have to pre-certify the IRS to get their refunds? Do they have to prove who they are and whether they're working or not to get the tax breaks that they're getting?
No, you have to prove your children, but you don't have to prove enough for your tax breaks. And by the way, if we really want to make government more efficient, why are we not improving government and those systems to make data more accessible between agencies rather than having parents and moms jump through hoops to prove their child is their child? Why aren't we doing things on the back end to make government more efficient rather than putting it on taxpayers and citizens? There are ways to do this, but we'd actually have to work together to find a way to ensure that we don't penalize those who need this assistance most.
Right, and have a little compassion and less cruelty. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, and we really appreciate Representative Leger Fernandez for allowing Senator Murray to go next, so thank you. And we've also been joined by Representative Shelton, and we thank Whip Clark for her great leadership and for being here today. You want to add anything?
I just want to thank you again for hosting us here and thank the panel. And especially to the moms here, we see you and we're going to fight for you. And thank you for sharing your stories.
Ready? Thank you so much to my great colleagues for putting this together and shining a light on what is happening to women in this country as a result of the egregious policies that are being implemented and the result of this big, ugly betrayal of a bill, should it pass, because I think most people are just not aware of it, nor should they be. They're home taking care of their kids. They're working 2 or 3 jobs. They are frantically trying to make their lives work, and they don't have time to see what these guys in Washington, D.C. are doing to them. So I want to thank you for putting this hearing together, and I want to thank all of our panelists for being here and really helping people understand what this is going to mean for everybody. This is an amazing time in our country where we have Republicans who believe that the best way to give a tax cut to the wealthiest of Americans is by putting it on the backs of women and families and the people who actually make this country work. And it is just stunning to me what is in this bill. You talked about the Medicaid reporting requirements. It's not work requirements, it's reporting requirements. You're working. You're talking about the impact, Ms. Curtis, to a family who is you just thought your life was going to be one way and it turned around in a second, and you are trying to give your child an opportunity. Or Ms. Moss, what you're doing to take care of multi-generation of families. I mean, you are the face of so many women who really are the backbone of this country. So thank you for putting a face to that and helping us tell the story of what's happening out there. We've talked so far at this hearing a lot about what's happening with the big, beautiful betrayal of a bill that is coming at us. But there's so much more happening as well. As ranking member on the vice chair of the appropriations, I am talking to each one of the agencies right now about the massive layoffs that are happening. A lot of those are women who are just trying to keep their families together. Senator Also Brooks knows this better than anybody. She's represents a district with a lot of them in there. They're stopping payments to programs that impact women every single day. They're rewriting guidance that helps women who show up at a hospital pregnant with serious life-saving conditions, the EMTALA provisions, to laying the groundwork to take away medication abortion, which is absolutely needed in this country and been here for 20 years. They are withholding Title X family programs. I mean, it's just like every single day I wake up and go, God, what are they doing today? And I'm seeing it from a policy perspective, but I'm also seeing what's really happening to families, the chaos that this is causing. So I really appreciate everybody speaking out about this right now. And Shalanda, great to see you here. We miss you tremendously. And like I just said, a lot of things are attacking women from all different angles. So as they are moving forward this disastrous bill, the canceling funding for programs that support women, the huge cuts to housing programs that we're seeing. We're talking about reporting requirements, and there's nobody at the other end to even answer a phone call anymore because of these agencies that have been devastated to personnel. Can you kind of give us a big, broad picture of what you think the overall impact for American women?
Yeah, this is all shock and awe. It's almost impossible to wrap your brain around. I think Senator Klobuchar talked about the tariffs. Moms are walking in stores paying 30% more for goods that they need for their kids. We have this bill that's going to impose significant cuts to services they need on top of that. And then we have the other part of the budget that Senator Murray works on that is going to, unfortunately, things that DOGE are hitting like Head Start or Title I that helps schools around this country make sure we provide a certain level of education for our kids. All those things are compounding pressure on families. And unless you spend as much time as some of us do on these things, you are out raising your kids, living your life, but you know something doesn't feel right. Things aren't coming as easy as they used to, and people are going to slip through the cracks because it's coming from DOGE, it's going to come from this bill, it's coming from tariffs, and some of us have to continue to put all those things out there so people see the full picture and hopefully understand what the stakes are here.
Yeah, and I think what I hear from a lot of people, I've heard the word fear more from my constituents in the last few months than I have in my lifetime. And the chaos and the overwhelming of it. And they just want to give me a hug. I'm like, no, I need to give all of you a hug. But the fact is that we can stop this. And that's what I really wanted to emphasize today. By speaking out, by telling your stories, by making it visible what's happening to people, this is not a time to give up to anyone who's listening right now. This is the time to tell your story and fight back. If we don't fight back, then all those people who are counting on us don't have a chance. So I just feel stronger than I have in my entire career that speak up, speak loud, fight back. We beat back the ACA in 2017 when they tried to repeal it. We can do this now, but we have to do it by being strong. So I just want to thank each one of you for being here and to remind all of us, keep our shoulders up and keep fighting.
Excellent. We'll go to two congresswomen to even the playing field, and then to Senator Alsobrook. So thanks.
So thank you, Senator Klobuchar. I'm Teresa Alegre Fernandez, and I happen to be chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus. We are the largest number of Democratic women in the House ever. And it's our job to make sure that voices like yours are heard in every single corner of America. Because what you are telling us today, and especially Ms. Moss, Ms. Smith, Ms. Curtis, you are telling us about the hard work it takes to be a mother in America, about the hard work it takes to be a daughter in America, about the hard work that you are engaged in on a daily basis to care for the people you love, to feed the people you love, to make sure that they are getting the health care that they need, because it's that love that you have that leads to the rage that I think, Ms. Curtis, it was your word, that you said you feel rage. I feel your rage right now. Because when Republicans say, you are not working hard enough, do any of you think that you could work any harder? Can you work any harder, Ms. Moss? Ms. Smith, you worked 3 jobs to feed your children. Could you have worked any harder than that? Couldn't you? Just thinking about it brought tears to your eyes. It brought tears to each of our eyes. Ms. Curtis, the amount of work that you described to get your child the health care he needs to survive, to live. To live. I mean, and the paperwork. The paperwork. I mean, can you fill out any other form? No, right? And I think that that's the point of what you have done, is you have brought to light that how dare they say you don't work? How dare they say that you are lazy and not deserving of this basic care when they are willing to make sure that the top 0.1% get these benefits. And both in the Senate and the House, we brought amendments in the Rules. I sit in the Rules Committee and said, okay, how about if no billionaires get these tax credits? No, they voted that down. How about if no people make more than 100 millionaires don't get these tax credits? That voted down. And they did say that we can't vote for that because millionaires and billionaires make this work. It's $3.3 million and above. Do any of you make more than $3.3 million? But you work harder than many of those that do. I want to address an issue that I care a lot about, which is rural hospitals. And Ms. Curtis, you know what I'm talking about, right? Because you come from a rural area. I don't know, Ms. Smith and Ms. Moss, if you're familiar as much, but rural hospitals are going to close because of this bill. I've already visited many of the rural hospitals in my district. I'm the Democrat that represents the largest rural district in America, held by a Democrat. And they are going to close. I'll be visiting 2 next week. One no longer provides OBGYN care. You cannot go to that hospital if you're pregnant. You have to go to another one, an hour and a half away. And that hospital is going to be at risk of closing. In which case, if you are pregnant, you go into labor, you have a life-threatening complication, you're going to have to drive about 3.5 hours to get care. Can you imagine, everybody listening, what it's like? Your contractions are coming. You're worried about whether you're going to be able to keep that baby or stay alive. Think about it. Every second counts. Every minute counts. And you have to drive 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours. And you know what? In the states that did not expand Medicaid, the Republican states that did not expand Medicaid, more women died. So when your senator says people will die, she is absolutely right. 51,000 more people will die a year because of this bill. And Ms. Frye, can you speak at all to the fact that more women will die because of the closure of rural hospitals, and also because of the fact that Medicare is going to get cut by $530 billion?
Well, I think your point makes it clear that nobody is paying attention to the actual infrastructure of healthcare that's so essential for women and families. We're already seeing rural hospitals close. And as you pointed out, labor and delivery units are closing, they're expensive. That has practical consequences, not only in costs, but also the health and well-being of families. We have a Black maternal health crisis in this country. And we already have rates that are far too high. And when you shut down clinics, when you make it harder to access care, prenatal care, it will get worse and not better. That is a fact. We know that, and that's what we're going to see. I think so much of what you talked about with respect to particularly older people who, and Medicare, some of the tools and the provisions that would have allowed for example, savings programs that allow folks to do cost sharing are being blocked by this bill, which has terrible effects for older people and people with disabilities. Medicaid covers home and community-based services that now will not be available to folks with disabilities. So I think the impacts are enormous. And I think what people aren't paying attention to or aren't lifting up is what's the actual infrastructure that makes this work, right? And the trickle-down effects of these cuts, which, as I understand it, practically means that states don't have enough resources. And so as a result, then they shut things down. Right, like that's part of what's happening with rural hospitals is they can't afford to run them because now states are going to face more pressure to pay for things. That's devastating, and it doesn't serve women or families in this country.
Right, thank you. And I would point out that as you're looking to get those 4 Republican senator votes, and I'm sorry that the Oops Caucus has not
They're the people
has
that
not
haven't read the
delivered,
bill
has not
yet
del-
when
but,
they
you know,
voted
yeah,
for it.
yeah. But we are giving them a chance that they will be able to vote on the rule today.
Yeah.
And if they actually didn't like that bill, they can vote down the rule. And we're calling on our Republican colleagues to vote down the rule today. But, the maternal mortality in the Republican districts, states went up, and 80% of the rural hospital closures happened in those Republican states. So hopefully you'll be able to have a conversation with them. And with that, Senator, I
you.
yield back.
Okay, Representative Takuda.
Thank you. And first of all, just a big mahalo to Senator Klobuchar and Cortez Masto, Whip Clark, Rep. Dingell for putting this together. And to all of you, you're our heroes. You really are, sitting in front of us. We've got flashy titles, but you're the heroes. And Charlie, I want you to know, you bring us joy. In a week, in a month, in a year so far that has not had much joy, you bring us joy. You have more courage, heart, and hope than a lot of people in Congress. Can I say that? We could use a whole lot more Charlies and moms in Congress right now. So let's give Charlie a hand. Thank you. You give us hope. And I want to piggyback off of Teresa's question and comment line about rural hospitals. I co-chair the Bipartisan Rural Health Caucus in Congress. I worry every day about who's going to close their doors. And we know in the last 15 years, over 150 have, and over 700 to date, right now in a recent study, are set to potentially close their doors. I want to ask the moms in the house, what does it mean if you don't have a hospital to go to, or a clinic, or your doctor? I know I cried when my pediatrician left town, but what does it mean when you can't get to the health care you need, your family needs, your child needs? Talk about what that will be like, that fear, when things close down and providers go away.
We're blessed. We live just outside of the Des Moines metropolitan area, and so we are able to somewhat frequently access providers. But like many Iowans, we drive hours to Iowa City to get specialized health care. And what we've personally experienced are more and more of our pediatric subspecialty providers leaving the state. And so we're actually in the process of looking to go to Senator Klobuchar's state in order to gain access to some of our specialized health care, which means traveling 3 or more hours one way to be able to get those services. Nobody should have to travel 3 or more hours to get life-saving health care. Charlie deserves better. Anybody deserves better.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? I 100% agree with you. Charlie deserves better, rural America deserves better, and when you have to travel that long for your health care and the cost of gas, if you have a car, all these things, people will move out of rural America, and that's absolutely what we are seeing. I want to touch upon something that kept coming up in the conversation, the churn. The disenrollment, the re-enrollment, the struggle to see if you're just going to make a couple $100 less so you qualify for the SNAP. This is how they save money, on the backs of everyday people who just want food on the table and health care for their loved ones. We're seeing them do this in the process right now. Tell me what it means in that churn. I had constituents tell me they'd be measuring rice. They sold wedding rings for gas and for food. They couldn't give their child a second helping, even though they were hungry. I've got senior citizens choosing meds over meals. When you can't have Medicaid for 3.5 years, as you said, if you don't have SNAP benefits, and we know SNAP is supplemental, so you're not making it to the end of the month. And by the way, they cut TFAP, and they cut a whole lot of other programs, billions of dollars right now. If you don't have a food box to help get you to the end of the month, what does that feel like? They need to hear it, that there's a real cost to taking away and withholding what people need.
Ms. Smith?
If it wasn't for the breadbasket and for harvesters, I don't think my kids would be able to eat. They would literally go 2 weeks without eating. Luckily, in our state, they for the summer, they do have a program where they can go get free meals, breakfast and lunch. I'm also grateful that they are doing the Sunbucks, which I get for all 3 out of 4 of my kids for summer. So that is going to help a little bit. But once the summer's over with, I'm going to go right back to struggling again to make sure that I can provide food for my kids. And it's gotten to the point that my kids and we actually sit down and we get a notebook and pen, and we make a calendar off of a notebook, and we write down our meals every night on what we're going to do. And if like one night nobody's really hungry, we move it to the next night. I mean, it's gone to the point that I do struggle. Like I work a full-time job, and it's just gotten out of hand. Like it really has. It went from to where you were only supposed to work 20 hours a week to be able to be qualified. Now it has moved up to 30. I work 45 hours a week, and I only get paid once a month. Literally, my whole paycheck goes to my bills. And if it wasn't for the fact that, for a family of 5, I still am like almost $600 below the line. If I would to make that extra $600, I would lose everything. And me and my kids would struggle.
Thank you, thank you. I wish you weren't here, but thank you for being here. You're our hope, and we're out there fighting for you.
Thank you. Just before I turn over to Senator Angela, could you just tell during the school year when you wake up in your schedule with the 4 kids and when you go to work on the bus? And
Okay, so my oldest is 21, so she's not working right now, and also with the medical, my 21-year-old, almost 22, cannot even get Medicaid, and she is a diabetic. I have to literally fork out $300. It's like $600 a month, just so she has the one insulin that really keeps her going. She's only living off of her nighttime insulin, because she cannot get Medicaid. But back to your question, I wake up at 5 o'clock every morning. I get my younger 2 kids up, my 12-year-old and my 11-year-old. I get them up about 5. We leave the house at 5:30. I have to be to work by 6. My route normally starts anywhere between 6:15 and 6:30. My first route does not end until 9. And then if I go to do a noon route, I have that to do. But my day starts at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I don't get home sometimes until after 5.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Senator Klobuchar. I know I missed Whip Clark. I want to thank her and my other sisters who have come over from the House, who are in this fight with me. To our witnesses, thank you so much. Shalanda Young, it's so good to see you, and I repeat that how we miss you. Oh, how we miss you, Ms. Frye, and to these other super incredible witnesses who've come today. Charlie is sharp as ever. I don't know who can see him from back there, but he's dressed like a senator today in his blue suit, so it's so good to see him as well. You know, I know much has been said today. You know, I think the point that I'm not sure has been made are two. One is that it is just breathtaking how completely inhumane the treatment has been of the American people. We have watched a leader who is ruthless, who is cruel, and the inhumanity of the decisions that have been made, I think, will long last. Any discussion we have here today is just how inhumane the treatment has truly been. And you know what, if we're honest about it, we have to keep asking why. You know, I think now the lid has been lifted off of it. It was Elon Musk himself who said that this bill is, I think he said it was an abomination. He called it everything he could think of and revealed the fact that this has nothing whatsoever to do with cutting so that we might cut our deficit. In fact, we know that we will grow it by $3 trillion. So what is this about? It is about enriching billionaires. That's literally all that this is about. And so I don't think we spend any time here today, really, we don't even need to discredit this bill. It's already been discredited. We know what it is all about. So I just want to ask a couple of questions today of our witnesses. If I can ask both Ms. Frye and Ms. Young, if you might just give us a little information. I know that the Medicaid cuts are obviously taking up a lot of our focus, but there are also other lesser-known provisions that will further harm the availability and affordability of coverage in places like Maryland. For example, we have learned that insurers in our state have announced that they will need to increase health insurance rates by over 17% because of the loss of enhanced tax credits. So I wonder whether you might be able to speak to the other provisions in the bill that will make health care less affordable for working families in our state.
I'll start, and thank you, Senator, for your question and your leadership. You know, I say that as the proud daughter of 2 federal government workers, so I know what you're dealing with. I'll talk a little bit about the ACA in particular, and I alluded to this earlier with respect to some of the measures that are there that are particularly intended to undercut abortion access, which also leads to broader cuts. There's a provision that was added very late into the House bill that limits cost-sharing reduction payments in states where they have access to abortion. So in the states that require coverage of abortion, what that means is that the cost-sharing payment reductions, which are really tools to offset costs that people otherwise, like copays and things like that, the payments that are going to insurers to cover those will no longer be available if they offer abortion. So states that offer abortion require it will lose out. States where it's an option, like there are 13 states in DC that offer it as an option, are less inclined to want to do so if what it means is that the insurers will no longer get those payments. And the states that don't have abortion cover at all effectively, as Whip Clark said earlier, would mean that they don't have abortion coverage, right? So it's an attack on abortion, but it's done through the insurers. And at the end of the day, what it means is that these costs are going to be handed over, passed along to patients themselves. You know, that's one area. You know, there's another piece that Shalanda Young may want to speak to about the premium tax credits that are set to expire, that it's not clear that they're going to be enhanced. Again, that's another way of offsetting costs for folks. So I think those are the hidden things that people don't talk about, but they matter in terms of actual cost of health care.
Thank you.
You know, I'm not quite sure who read the bill before it was voted on. We talked about the oops moment. You know, I remember when this bill was going through Energy and Commerce, There was a question about whether or not if you didn't get the paperwork in for work requirements in Medicaid, whether that cut you off from the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act. And turned out, as people looked at each other and didn't really know the answer, that's the case. So not only are we penalizing people through extra paperwork in Medicaid, turns out we then turn around and expand that penalty to the Affordable Care Act if you want to turn to that program for health coverage. And not expanding, one of the things I said I was most proud of is the 2021 child tax credit, given the results, but also the number of people we were able to cover through the Affordable Care Act because they could finally afford the premiums, and not extending that premium help for families is just going to mean more people choose to go without coverage, and they're going to just take a risk every day.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. And we know the House has votes, so we're going to try to move here. Representative Schultz.
Thank you all so much for being here. As you just heard, votes have been called, so I'm only going to use a brief portion of my statement so we can also hear from Ms. Sykes. But as the first woman and mother in history to represent West Michigan in Congress and vice chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus, this is a top and burning issue. I want you to know how grateful I am to all of you for coming here today. I have never met a group of harder working women in my entire life. And I want you to know that we are working for you every single day. This disastrous budget betrayal is welfare. It's welfare for the 1%. My colleague said it before, we need work requirements for the billionaires that think that they can skate by while taking food out of the mouths of hungry children in this country. I won't stand for it. I want to turn over one question to Ms. Smith before I go. I want to talk about food. When we're talking about cutting SNAP benefits, it's not just about skipping a meal or experiencing a little pang of hunger. Food is medicine, especially for those living with life-threatening conditions like diabetes. Ms. Smith, can you talk just briefly about the impact of keeping a child with diabetes alive when your SNAP benefits would get cut?
It's really hard, because just for her main med, it's just a vial of insulin. Without and just her living off of her long-time night meds, her blood sugars are way out of whack. There's days that she is so tired because her blood sugar's so high. We've done everything we could to try to lower it. It's hard. It really is. And I've done everything I can to try to get Medicaid for her, and they've denied her every time, just because she's almost 22, and the requirements that they say for her, to be able to get it, she's not qualified for. And any other Medicaid that I've tried, Marketplace, everything, it's really out of hand. It's like $450, like if I were to get it for her. And even if I were to get insurance through my work, I still wouldn't be able to pay my bills, because it's almost like $900 a month just to make sure like she has her insulin and she's able to focus. So I've looked up and tried to be able to help her to keep her blood sugars lower, and to get her the food that she needs, which is really expensive, but I sacrifice it because not just her needs to eat. I have 3 other kids that need to eat plus myself. And there's times like I've literally gone without eating just to make sure my kids eat, and to make sure that my oldest, I can get her blood sugar to come down. But yeah, it's really hard, because I fear every day that, she's not going to wake up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Representative Sykes.
Thank you again, and let me say thank you to my colleagues for hosting us. I don't want to shortchange any of the praise that all 6 of you are owed for being here today, for taking time out of your schedule, but we do have votes, because this vote is to fix the rule from the bill that they didn't read, and so we want to make sure that we're there for that, just in case it has an opportunity to fail. But I want to quickly talk about EMTALA, because we've been talking about it in the sense of emergency abortion care. And EMTALA was originally created because hospitals didn't want to care for people if they could not pay. And so now we've got this case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. They punted, they didn't do what they needed to do, and now the administration says, we don't want anything to do with this EMTALA case. Good luck to you. Essentially, that's what they're saying to American women. But I also want to remind people, again, EMTALA is a statutory provision to prevent dumping of patients because they cannot pay. And now we have this bill that is going to make Medicaid, one of the largest payers of health care, unavailable to a lot of people. So I don't think that these things are, as I've said, there are no coincidences in Congress. These things work together, and I hope that we keep in mind this not only for abortion care, but also all of the care as we see people moving off of the Medicaid program, their payer, and not holding on to the protections of EMTALA. Again, no consequences in Congress. I always talk about the betrayal of this bill in terms of employment. And just to maybe get my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to talk to us. Because the largest employer in my district are hospital systems. And when I talk to, and we're fortunate to have a children's hospital in a mid-sized, Midwestern American city. If Medicaid is cut by $880 billion, those hospitals' bottom lines will suffer. They will be laying people off. Our local economy will suffer. And let's not forget the workforce. The nurses are women. Home health care workers, women. Nutritionists, a lot of women. And so not only are we devastating the healthcare, we're going to be wiping out a workforce, and a workforce that's predominantly women. Now, I wanted to ask Ms. Curtis this question because I imagine you may have some home health care workers who help support you. What would it mean if someone couldn't come in and help you with your beautiful son?
So one of the services that we utilize quite frequently is an in-home daycare program. And that is because Charlie does not qualify for a traditional daycare setting, and he is not complex enough for a medical daycare facility. As I stated before, I'm a public school teacher, but I don't teach in the district where my children go to school, and we have different school calendars, which means there are days when I have to report for pre-service or professional development, and without my direct support personnel or my medical daycare staff, my husband would have to take off work. There were 6 years where I did not work, and I stayed at home with Charlie, advocating and just trying to get him the support and the services that he needed. It was actually during my prime income earning age. When I went back into the workforce, my years of service were not recognized by my new job. And I was very fortunate to be able to negotiate with my employer that I would be a .75 staff member, meaning I'm technically full-time. And so I'm able to get primary health care insurance. And I was able to negotiate that I would not do those after-school staff meetings so that I can take him to therapy. It's a delicate web. We have to qualify for those services months in advance, and it's virtually impossible to make changes once those things are set in stone. So should those home and community-based services be cut, and they will be the first ones to be cut because they are not federally mandated, and in a state like Iowa, where we have a budget shortfall, that means that I will have to leave my job as a public school teacher, and we have a teacher shortage. There aren't a lot of us that choose to work with 8th and 9th graders. I'm one of the weird ones who does. And so without medical daycare in the home, I would have to lose my job.
Thank you, Representative Sexy. Everyone's working hard. Everyone's juggling.
Senator, can I point out the perverseness here? If this is about getting people to work, Medicaid helped her get to work.
Exactly. Good point. Well, now We have been joined by another Ms. Smith, just to not have more confusion. And that is my colleague, my great colleague from the state of Minnesota, Senator Smith.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar and Senator Cortez Masto and our representatives. And it's great to see our colleagues from the other side of the Capitol be here today. And just thanks a ton to all of you for being here. I think this is really helpful to help people understand what these cuts in this so-called Big Beautiful Bill will actually mean in the lives of regular folks. And I was really struck by something that Representative Sykes was talking about in terms of the impact on rural hospitals. And I mean, I have talked to rural hospitals who say that if any of this goes into action, this is not a question of if we end up closing down. You're talking about small critical access hospitals, 24 beds. They got a lot going on. They do an incredible service. But if these cuts go through, it's not a question of if they have to close. It's only a question of when and what goes first. And so I just hope that our colleagues who are thinking about voting for this bill will hear that and understand, because you know what they keep saying is, oh, nobody who is what's the word they use, Amy? How do they talk about it? Basically, like if you're deserving, you won't be impacted by this. And I mean, excuse me, I find that so insulting. Especially when I look at all of you and all of the incredible, I mean, especially you two, I mean, all of you, like what you do to kind of keep it together. What, you know, it's just, what else does it mean? There's this thing that they are also saying, which is that, you know, we just think that anybody who can work should work. And I mean, I've never known anybody who like chose not to work just so they could get, I mean, people work because they have to pay the bills. It just, again, is so insulting. But I want to dive into this a little bit. And if I may, Ms. Moss, I'd like to come to you. I want to just, if you could just talk a little bit about what Medicaid expansion has meant for you, and like what is involved for people who are trying to fill out all the paperwork to be able to get access to these to this health insurance. And as Reverend Warnock says, Senator Warnock says, this is what they're actually talking about here with Medicaid is a work reporting requirement. And I understand your story is a lot about Medicaid expansion, so I'd love to hear about that.
Yes, it is. Thank you. So I went years without health care after I ended my tenure with the public school system where I had health care. And I was taking a risk, not having it. And so in the between that time and the pandemic was my mother's major health event.
Yes.
And so once
you were taking care of your mother, right?
Yes. And so when the pandemic came, I was really scared because I had actually, I'm self-employed, and I had prospected tens of thousands of dollars of business that was about to close. And it was with the school system, and the school systems stopped meeting in person. And that was before everyone realized that we're going to do this virtually, because I was prepared for that pivot. But so I found myself in a real fix. What am I going to do? And someone suggested, well, see if you can get some public support. So I was like, well, I'll see if I qualify. And so expansion had happened, and I qualified for Medicaid. In reference to the paperwork, I have to give Virginia some credit. It has not been a nightmare for me. I know other people, friends of mine from high school in particular, who have situations like Charlie. It's not the same story with them.
Right.
So I wasn't sure if I had completed it correctly. I had gone meticulously through everything, and I was grateful. I got a letter in the mail that said that I was approved. And I've been approved every year, which I get scared all the time because I don't know what the renewal process is going to be like. But I'm grateful when I find out that I'm renewed again. The representative brought up a good point in reference to Medicare. I have to say, as a Medicaid recipient with parents who are on Medicare, both of my parents are basically in their mid-80s, all of the conversation all the time in reference to the care and being able to keep up with everything. It's very, very scary. You mentioned, can we work any harder? The answer is no. Getting our parents to appointments, taking care of myself, working, all the things, and then there's never quite a certainty what is about to be lost or potentially lost. So being a Medicaid recipient with parents, both of them on Medicare, who have their medical appointments and need their care, and being concerned all the time about how that's going to be impacted, trying to keep up with, well, what do we need to look at? What do we need to, and it's almost impossible every single day to keep up with everything.
Oh, yeah.
So the paperwork is daunting for me. And I'm always afraid that I'm going to miss something. So I agree with what she was saying. We should be talking about how to make the systems more effective.
Exactly. We should be making it easier.
We should be making
and more
it easier
effective. Still,
because
like, right.
life is not getting easier every day, especially navigating being a Gen Xer with aging parents, navigating the entire family scene. I'm grateful that both of my parents are still here and relatively healthy, even with health challenges.
Yeah.
But as their aging progresses and there's more responsibility that we as children have to take, and then all the news and what's going to happen, and you really want more effective systems versus a system that is daunting.
That's right.
And always threatening to take something from you when you've worked really hard just to be where you are.
A system should be designed so that people can succeed and not designed so that people fail.
Exactly.
And therefore, that's where the savings comes from, because they don't have insurance coverage. Thank you very much, Senator Klobuchar. I have colleagues here who I know want to ask questions. I appreciate you all.
And they've arrived at the perfect time because the House is in votes. So, Senator Hassan.
Thank you very much, Senator Klobuchar. And I know that you and Senator Cortez Masto and Congresswoman Clark and Congresswoman Dingell convened this conversation. I'm really appreciative of all of you. I'm particularly appreciative, though, of all of the folks who came as witnesses, as we call it around here, or as participants, I guess, because I know you're all really busy, and I know it's not easy to get here, and I really, really value you all being here. And I thought I would start with a question to you, Ms. Frye, about maternal health. In New Hampshire, we've seen 11 labor and delivery units close since the year 2000, which has led to maternity care deserts where women sometimes have to drive great distances to get the care that they need. Recently, in the Lakes region of New Hampshire, I have a constituent who had an unplanned birth at home after she went into labor and she realized she wouldn't make it to the hospital in time since the hospital was more than an hour away. Can you talk a little bit about how this reconciliation, Republican budget, big, bad, beautiful betrayal, whatever we all want to call it, how this budget bill will harm women's ability to access maternal care in their own community?
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator, for the question. And I think you really hit the nail on the head. The bill operates as if it doesn't really understand how healthcare works, and doesn't really understand the, cascading effects of enormous cuts. And what we'll see is when people can't access Medicaid and can't actually pay for care, it affects the providers themselves. We've already seen across many states closures of labor and delivery units. This will create more pressure. We already have a maternal health crisis. As well as anybody, that crisis is even worse for Black women and other women of color. And what is required is more investment, right? And to make sure that people get the care that they need when they need it. And it's not just about the infrastructure, it's also the ongoing prenatal care, right? Like that leads up to actual birth. So it's enormously problematic. It's not solely the units that no longer are available and people have to drive long distances, but even a lot of the clinic closures, like if you look at the effort to defund Planned Parenthood, a lot of folks are going to Planned Parenthood for a whole range of care, right? And so it's really enormously problematic. And in a country where the maternal mortality rate is too high, it's exactly what we ought not to be doing.
Well, I thank you for that. And my second question really follows up on the comment that you just made about Planned Parenthood clinics, and it's actually to you, Ms. Young. The language in the Republican bill that attempts to shutter Planned Parenthood clinics seeks to ban women from also seeks to ban women from getting private insurance coverage for abortion. Can you talk about what the impacts of this language, if it passes, will be on our healthcare system and on our economy if Republicans continue their efforts to restrict women's reproductive freedom?
I mean, we have the evidence in states that have taken the tack that the federal government is trying to follow.
Right.
And we have seen that hospitals, physicians don't know how to follow a lot of these rules.
Right.
And we have seen mortality rates skyrocket because of that. We've seen a lot of confusions, court battles, frankly, and that's just going to continue to spread if this language goes into effect nationwide. I don't think we want the chaos we're seeing in some of the states that have chosen to take a hatchet to abortion services and the fallout even beyond abortion to just frankly horror stories that people said really weren't going to happen. Well, turns out they're happening where physicians don't know where the line is.
Right.
And now with this bill, the hope is to federalize that confusion and chaos. And it should make us all afraid for women and children in this country.
Yeah, it definitely should. And it's also, look, women who can't control their reproductive health and plan their own families and make their own decisions are also less likely to be able to hold down a full-time job or provide for their families and move forward and build a better life. So I appreciate your comments very much, and it's one of the reasons we are fighting so hard to try to prevent this language from staying in the bill. I'm just about out of time, and I want to turn it over to my colleague, but I will just say to Ms. Curtis, thank you for being here. And I want to just make sure people understand that the implications on the Medicaid cuts will impact home health care in particular, and for those of us who have loved ones, as you do, who depend on home health care and who are caregivers, this is a really challenging time. So I thank you for being here to represent families all across the country who need great health care and at home as well as in hospitals and clinics. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator Hassan. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you. And I want to start by thanking you, Senator Klobuchar, along with Senator Cortez Masto and Representatives Clark and Dingell for hosting this forum today to highlight what we all know about this terrible Republican bill. It is bad for working families and it is bad for women. We all know that Republicans are coming after Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act to pay for their tax cuts for wealthy corporations and wealthy Americans. Women, I'm talking about moms, caregivers, women who are pregnant, women who have cancer, women who are going to the doctor to access birth control or STI screenings. Women will pay the price for these tax cuts for the very wealthy. I have been traveling the state of Wisconsin, hearing from families about the devastating impacts that Medicaid cuts would have on their families. And what I've heard is clear. People are upset and they are scared. Ms. Curtis, thank you so much for coming today to share with us what Medicaid means to you and what it means to Charlie. I've heard from so many families like yours in Wisconsin, parents of children with disabilities who are terrified that Republicans will take away their Medicaid coverage and leave their children without the care and services that they need. The people who have the power to stop these deep, deep cuts to Medicaid, Republican members of the Senate, are meeting now to put the final touches on their bill. If they were here, Ms. Curtis, what would you say to them?
His name is Charles William Curtis, and he deserves access to home and community-based services. He deserves and has a civil right to attend a local school, a public school, in his own community. And Charlie is just one of millions of children across our country that are fighting for access to health care, access to education, access to their communities. And it feels like it's an all-out attack on our disability rights. I don't want to go back to 1950. And I would ask them today in 2025 to be Charlie's voice and to speak for him and the millions of children and people with disabilities around our country who deserve to have the right to live a more fiscally responsible life in their homes instead of being institutionalized.
Beautifully said. And we will all uplift your story and your words and do everything we can to get those to the Republican members of the Senate who could put a stop to this. Ms. Moss, you highlighted the importance of Medicaid for caregivers in your testimony. I had the honor of serving first as my grandmother's primary caregiver. I was raised by my grandparents. And I know how exhausting, how expensive, and how challenging it can be to help a loved one remain safe and healthy. I also know how rewarding it is to take care of somebody you love. It's truly a labor of love. I also was, when my mother was getting older, needing more help, my mother was on Medicaid. Before she needed skilled nursing care and then when she needed skilled nursing care. I came in when you were telling a little bit about some of the paperwork that can be exhausting, and I know this bill is trying to add a lot of red tape. I had a visceral reaction the other day when I was thinking of a time that I stepped in to help my mother reapply after she got some notice that she had been dropped for some technical paperwork, red tape reason, and how terrifying it was because I knew that she desperately needed that coverage for many conditions. Anyways, it was being a caregiver for my grandmother and helping my mother out that made me so passionate about ensuring that everyone has access to care, both the person who needs the care and the caregiver. So what does this measure, this bill, say to you about how Senate Republicans are prioritizing the assistance that caregivers can rely on?
I think the main thing that I think about, or I've been thinking about during this time, is whether or not we're going to have a system that supports our humanity. And I think it's just inhumane to think about taking care away from everyday people, everyday working people, so that people who already have more than enough can have more. And I think that's what I sit with every day.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've been speaking toward these issues, and some of my story being shared on social media, sometimes I really don't look at the comments. But one of the comments that a post from one of my speeches earned was, "Why don't you just work harder to be more successful?" And that's something I can't even speak to in reality, because they don't know how hard I've worked my entire life. Growing up as the child of small business owners, Black people in Southern Virginia, what that was like. And so I've worked since I was 4. And to be in my career at a time when I was set to, I had everything in line to literally soar and have an event that would have me realize that it was gonna take longer for me to get where I really wanted to be financially, so that I could support my mother. And I can relate with your story of coming out of the school system. I transitioned into teaching at 31 years old. And I had over a decade of work experience, but I got no credit for that. So at 31, I was making what a 21-year-old would make in public education. And that school system was not willing to negotiate with me. And during that, my tenure in public education was also the economic downturn of 2007, 8, 9. So I worked 3 years with no cost of living increase. And so for someone to say to me to work harder and to recognize that I spent 10 years on the front lines of education, I've worked primarily in youth development and education, and I come from a family of educators, and I've worked since I was 4. And in my 50s as a Gen Xer with aging parents, that there's constantly a threat for just healthcare, it's unconscionable in the United States of America. So what I'm constantly faced with is, who do we say this nation really is, and who built this nation, and who should be looked out for in the terms of public policy? Should it be the public, or should it be a handful of people seeking to enrich themselves more off of the backs of the working class?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next, I'm going to call on Senator Hirono.
Oh, thank you very much. I want to thank the House members who are here, and Senator Klobuchar for this bicameral spotlight hearing. And we all have stories to tell, and thank you very much for coming here to share your experiences and the programs that are so important to your situations. And, you know, as I say, we all have stories to tell. I come to this country from another country, and I have a mother. I'm an immigrant, and I had a very courageous mother who escaped a terrible marriage to bring me to this country and completely changed my life. We were very poor. And she had no job security, she had no health care, so I understand what happens if somebody doesn't have health care, doesn't have that ability to be taken care of, and you know, if in my mother's situation, if she didn't work, she didn't get paid, and you don't have rent or food money. So I share a lot of the experiences that so many people in our country, particularly women, share. We have a regime that is very busy dismantling government services that we all rely upon, and they're doing this by eliminating tens of thousands of workers who provide services to us, by eliminating programs, by eliminating funds. And so when the government is very busy dismantling, or the regime busy dismantling all of these programs that we rely upon, the people who suffer the most are the caregivers. And who are the caregivers? Mainly women. And so every time there are cuts or changes that makes it a lot harder for people to have health care, it's women who bear the brunt. Education cuts, it's mainly women who bear the brunt of childcare, of, you know, you name it. So all of these cuts are happening during this regime. And that is why I think our community, the American people, need to know what is happening to them. Now, for example, even if this administration and the Republican House members say they're not cutting Medicaid, but the work requirements that they're imposing are probably going to result in a lot of people. In fact, CBO says some 13 million people on Medicaid will not be able to meet possibly the work requirements or all of the paperwork that they're going to have to fill. Correct? So even if they say they're not cutting Medicaid, the effects will be that a lot of people, women mainly, and children, will not qualify for Medicaid. And are any of you familiar with what happened in Georgia, where they imposed a work requirement and all the bureaucracy attendant to forcing people there in that state and having to show that they're trying to work and all that? Are any of you familiar with that, who can talk about it? Because that is what's probably going to happen with the work requirements in this bill.
Thank you, Senator. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a reminder that the provision isn't really about work. It's really about finding a way to get people off Medicaid. If you look at that study, there are a couple of other studies, and they show that work requirements don't work. And they don't work in part because most of Medicaid recipients are working. And if you look at moms, most of them are already working. So the requirements around, reporting really frequently, the additional paperwork is really designed to make sure that people just miss those requirements and then they get booted off. And that's the way that they are, quote unquote, saving money. And so I think you're absolutely right to raise it. This isn't about work. It's really just about denying folks access to health care that they need.
Do any of you think that we are adequately informing the American people that this is what's really going to happen with these work requirements and that millions of people will be kicked off of Medicaid, many of them women and children? Do you think we are doing an effective job of conveying this information to people, our American people? And how can we do it better, if not? Anybody?
I'll take
You look like you want to weigh in. Go ahead.
Just because of the work that I do with the Commonwealth Institute.
Moss.
Yes, the work that I do with the Commonwealth Institute in Virginia, I'm aware of a lot of the policy work that's going on. I think that the average person, it's confusing. I think that the news cycle is confusing. There's always a report about something. Things are always happening and popping. I think that there's a lot of confusion. I think that there's always ways to improve the messaging for average people to understand what the basic effects are that that people could experience.
Am I out of time? Okay, I just want to follow up. So do you think, any of you, do you think that if the American people knew that this was just basically a ploy to kick off millions of people off of Medicaid who qualify, deserve it, all of that, do you think that they would rise up and say, this is really not how things should happen? Do you think the American people, if told that, they would say, that's not what I want done in my name?
Senator, I'll take that if you will. Look, it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure, but we talked about this earlier, people are living lives. They are trying to feed families. The news cycle is coming fast and furious. And frankly, if you listen to all of this, it is easy to dismiss as doom and gloom based on politics. And the unfortunate thing is everything we have talked about here is real. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And my great fear is a lot of people who aren't listening to this debate for one reason or another are going to wake up and not have access to these programs, or their aunt won't, or their grandmother won't. And then it's going to be a pox on all of our houses. The government failed me yet again. Mm-hmm. And in my most dour state about thinking about this, someone who believes in government and all that it can do for people, it's people who want to sow that deep hate for government and want to tear down those institutions. But we can't stop doing what we're doing here today and talking about this. If anyone would bother to be in a room with Charlie, I'm not quite sure how they could ignore this story. So we're going to keep doing what we're doing here today because it's overwhelming for many of us who've been in this town doing this for a long time. This is the worst thing I've seen come across policy desks in my almost 25-year career in budget. And we talked about Medicaid. There's the Affordable Care Act. People won't be able to afford the premiums. They will lose health care because of that. It's the pylon.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hirono, and thanks, Charlie's made it through much more than most kids his age, so thank you. Representative Trahan.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much, Senator Klobuchar. And
You do get the prize for coming back after votes. So.
I wouldn't miss this. The stories that you all have shared have been incredible, and the least I can do is come back and honor that by telling you that we're here in your corner. We're fighting like hell on your behalf. And how I think so far what's been so resonant is how hard you work and how much this feels like a betrayal when services that you've relied on to keep your family fed, healthy, housed, and safe are being ripped right out from underneath you. Charlie, not only do you dress like a senator, you behave better than all of them. So, not present company excluded. I meant my Republican senators who are. My apologies, Senator. Came out wrong. I'm going to shift gears to talk about what so many women feel today, and it's the heartbreak of finding out that pregnancy is going to be hard for them. I know what it's like to turn to IVF as a last hope, and the emotional toll, the financial strain, but then if all goes well, the overwhelming joy of finally holding, in my case, my 2 daughters in my arms. But every woman who's walked that path knows how out of reach it is for far too many. Right now, Medicaid covers almost no fertility services. Instead of gutting the program, we should be expanding it so that starting a family isn't a privilege, but a possibility for every woman, no matter her coverage or her zip code. Yet that possibility is slipping away. In April, the CDC eliminated the team that has tracked IVF access and outcomes for more than 30 years, leaving us without critical access to data. And now the Republican reconciliation bill threatens deep cuts to Medicaid, the very program that would help expand IVF access and protect maternal care from pregnancy through postpartum. In my district alone, 3 hospitals have closed in just the last year, including the only maternity ward in the western part of my district. Maternity deserts are spreading, OB units are shuttering, and women are being left with nowhere to turn, whether they're trying to conceive or safely carry a pregnancy to term. This isn't just about IVF. It's about whether we believe women, all women, deserve a fair shot at motherhood and the care that they need every step of the way. Because cutting Medicaid doesn't just cut coverage, it cuts care when women need it the most. So Director Young, you've led the Office of Management and Budget through some of the most consequential policy decisions in recent memory. Given your experience, can you speak to what's at stake, particularly for women and working families, when Congress proposes deep cuts to Medicaid, a program that underpins everything from prenatal care to potential IVF coverage, and what it would mean for women living in communities already facing maternity care deserts?
Well, one, you're talking to a mom of a girl, Charlie, who came here via IVF, my only shot at becoming a mother. And my great fear is that, that is also under attack for reasons that I just can't even wrap my brain around. And my great fear in all of this is, people who are able to become parents and who are parents, that services are being ripped away, and frankly, the dignity of those families to provide for their children. Parents care about what their children see and what they experience and what they had taken to adulthood. And we should be asking a question, what can the government do to make sure there's humanity in raising kids and having families that are strong? The thing that's striking about this process has been, you would think when you are designing a healthcare bill that touches millions of Americans, you'd ask this to yourself, how do we create a healthcare system that expands healthcare access? I've seen almost no discussion of that from those who wrote this bill. It has been, how can we get the most savings to pay for tax cuts? We have a major healthcare bill, major food assistance bill, and no one working on that bill has asked, how do we make a program that makes people healthier and improves their well-being? That should tell us something. So I'm worried about everything we've talked about today. We tried to expand in the last 4 years maternal support for a year after birth. We know that birth is one day and complications arise long after birth. So again, we should be talking about expansion into areas where our health outcomes are not reflective of where we should be in the United States of America, and yet we're seeing a retraction of health services in this bill.
Well, as you remind us all the time, Democrats are unapologetic about extending health care to more people. That is where we stand in this debate.
I think Ms. Curtis said it best. It should be a civil right for kids to have access, mothers, families to have access to health care in this country.
That's exactly right.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 2 more questioners left, Charlie, and I know that Ms. Young has to pick up her own child soon. And so we're joined by Representative Ansari from the great state of Arizona.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much to our witnesses for being here today. I know it's been an incredibly long day with difficult questions, and we so appreciate your work. As the youngest woman in Congress, I know firsthand how this bill will hurt young women, people like myself, my friends, my family. And not only does this bill make historic draconian cuts to Medicaid, it specifically targets Planned Parenthood, defunding and effectively shuttering clinics. My district is home to 2 of the 7 Planned Parenthood clinics in Arizona, a vast and rapidly growing state with not nearly enough access to women's reproductive care. Closing even one of these clinics, either in Phoenix or in a rural hub like Flagstaff, would make life-saving health care inaccessible, out of driving distance, or simply non-existent for so many women. Because of the Hyde Amendment specifically, Medicaid funding is already prohibited from going towards abortions. So instead, we know that these cuts will hurt young women's ability to get routine sexual wellness checkups, STI testing, and other basic health care that Planned Parenthood provides. As of only a few months ago, abortion is, thank goodness, protected in Arizona by ballot measure. But after Roe v. Wade was overturned, I'm sure you know, Arizona women were suddenly subject to an 1864 law that banned all abortions, except in the case of the mother's life, and threatened doctors with jail time. This territorial law passed before Arizona even became a state, sending women who had the reproductive freedoms that Roe had guaranteed for 50 years back to a time before electricity, cars, and indoor plumbing. That's the time period that the Trump administration is clearly trying to take us back to. So, Ms. Frye, this question is for you. In your testimony, you note that this legislation would defund and close 200 clinics that are operated by Planned Parenthood. Could you talk specifically about the impact that this will have on young women, not only in Arizona, but across the country?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that people focus on the abortion piece, which is an important point, and obviously abortion is health care. But the role of those clinics across the country, as you point out, is much broader than that. People go to Planned Parenthood often for just health care, period, all sorts of STI testing, family planning. And so when you target those clinics, you're really targeting the ability of folks just to get the care that they need. That may be the only place they go for help. And it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. It will be devastating. The numbers suggest that 1 million folks, and a little more than 1 million, would lose access to contraceptive care, for example. And on top of that, we know that Medicaid covers roughly 3/4 of the public dollars spent on family planning comes through Medicaid. These are devastating cuts for families and for young women in particular who should be able to make responsible decisions about their own health and their own fertility. Planned Parenthood is a key part of that, but it really impacts so much more, just their ability just to be healthy and well.
And to your point, we know that abortion is just such a small part of the work that Planned Parenthood does. Can you speak a little bit more about that, if you have the percentage breakdowns or?
Yeah, I don't have the exact percentage breakdowns. I will say that, in Earlier in my career, I had the privilege of being on the board of the local Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, and I know the role that they play in communities across the country, particularly as people have pointed out, in communities where we're already seeing other pressures on rural healthcare and people have to go farther for healthcare. And so what happens in a lot of communities is that the clinic is where they go for everything. Right, and so they get screenings, they get STI treatment, they get all of the things, a very small part, and I wish I had the number, I'm certainly happy to track it down. A small percentage of what they do is actually abortion care. They should be able to provide that care, it's really critical care. But the role of those clinics is often just to make sure that people are making sound decisions and that they're going regularly to a provider and getting care and having the, particularly for young women, having the discipline necessary to learn, this is how I stay healthy, right? Like you don't want anybody sort of waiting until the last minute to get the care that they need, because that also is more expensive, right? And it means people are using emergency rooms and things for what should just be regular care that they're getting. And it's often the Planned Parenthood clinic that provides that care.
Well, thank you so much again to all of the women here today. We know that gender parity is such a massive issue still in Congress, and we don't have enough women here, let alone young women, and these pieces of legislation are making, drastic cuts with significant devastating impacts for young women across the country, and I think there's a very important role for women to play in fighting back against this. So thank you for everything that you're doing, and I yield back.
Very good. Representative McClellan. We end with the state of Virginia as we begin.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today. I know I am all that stands between you and picking up your kids or getting on 95. I do want to thank Ms. Moss for the shout out earlier today, because you were who I was fighting for during those 26 hours in the Energy and Commerce Committee hearing. And I almost became one of the statistics of the Black woman 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than my white counterparts. And so I've spent a lot of time focusing on how to address the maternal mortality crisis, which, as we know, impacts women of color disproportionately, but all women, too many women of every race here in the United States are dying, and I fear that this big ugly bill will make that worse in 3 ways, some of which we touched on. So I have a couple of questions on that. We probably won't have time to get to all 3, but I first want to talk about the defunding of Planned Parenthood. And in Virginia, we are the only state in the South that does not have restrictions or bans, and we have become a safe haven for abortion access. But that means that as other states have not, the increase in the number of people coming has made providing care hard already. And so, Ms. Frye, can you talk about how defunding Planned Parenthood in a commonwealth like a state or commonwealth like Virginia, how that will make it worse for those states that are still providing service, but with many, many more patients?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We know already from the data post the Dobbs decision that people are traveling farther. And so even, states like North Carolina, Virginia, even further north, are experiencing more patients, longer wait times. That creates more pressure and requires just more money to make sure that you actually can operate to serve all those patients. And so now if you're talking about getting rid of clinics who are absorbing a lot of that incoming, you're making matters much, much worse and making care not only unaffordable, but unavailable completely.
And what people don't want to talk about is the fact that there is a very direct correlation between access to abortion care and maternal death. And now the bill also includes a provision preventing the marketplace health insurance plans from including abortion coverage from receiving federal payments, even if the patient pays for the abortion coverage out of pocket. So can you talk about how that's going to impact women?
Well, it just makes care more expensive, right? Like, and it ironically interferes with states' autonomy to make decisions about whether or not they want to make sure that abortion is available in their states. They're eliminating the cost-sharing reductions or reducing those payments when a state has access to abortion. And so it effectively says if you have access to abortion, we won't allow for the cost-sharing payments to happen. And it just passes on those costs to patients themselves and patients who already are struggling to make ends meet. So it's a backdoor way of making sure that abortion is effectively not available or too expensive to access.
And more women will die as a result. So I was in the state legislature when we expanded Medicaid, and we saw how important that was, not only to addressing maternal health, but just helping connect people to medical homes and get preventative care. And Ms. Moss, you are somebody who is part of the expansion population. Can you talk about how this big ugly bill will impact you and your family directly?
I try not to worry, but I do worry, to be honest. And I have to try to keep myself calm and patient. It's scary thinking about as I get older. And my parents are getting older. So it's not like they're requiring less care, less time. As they get older, they require more care, more time. And I've been very patient with myself in terms of, building my business. But again, life is getting more expensive all the way around. So what I am always concerned about is just being able to keep up with everyday life.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should be that way.
Yeah.
So it's very daunting to look at the uncertainty of what should be civil rights, what should be human rights, what should be just an honest honoring of our humanity. We need health care. And it should not be something that is complicated. It shouldn't be something that we have to figure out, should everyone be able to go to the doctor? At the end of the day, that's what this is about. Who can go to the doctor? Who can get the care they need? And I'm forgetting her name. I've been trying to think of it, but she's a friend of mine on Facebook. I know her from high school, and she has a child, and she's always posting, he's 19, and he's not been able to get Medicaid, and he's autistic. And the struggle that she has and just the phase that he's been in over the past few weeks has been that they have no assistance for the challenges that he's facing right now. And their entire family life is constantly at a state of crisis, just trying to keep him safe and trying to keep themselves safe without him having the proper services. So I think about myself. I think about all the people and all the stories I've heard since we've been in this fight, and there are so many instances of everyday people who are just trying to live and be healthy, and we have to fight just for a basic standard of life so that people who enjoy an extraordinary lifestyle already can have more, and it just does not make sense to me.
Thank you for that. We are fighting for you.
All right. Well, thank you, Representative, and thank you all for staying with us. This is one of the most extraordinary group of witnesses I've ever seen, all in your own ways, and all speaking from the heart and eye-opening. And we're going to make sure and get these stories out, everyone out there, so people can actually see the impact. We're really good at using numbers. We all do, and you heard us today. Some people are experts on numbers, but behind every number are real people. And I want to thank especially the three of you, as well as our experts here, for being with us. And all the senators were talking about it when they got back there for the vote. And we're going to keep this going strong and hope that the world out there understands the impact that this has, particularly on women, on everybody. But when you really look at it and you look at your day, Ms. Smith, starting at 5 a.m. and 4 kids and your work and doing it all, and Ms. Curtis with Charlie and everything you've done, and Ms. Moss helping your parents. It's an unbelievable story, and they need to understand the people who are depending on a modicum of help, right? A modicum of help with groceries, a modicum of help with healthcare, just to be able to what? Keep working, which is what we want to. So thank all of you for being here today. With that, it's adjourned. I'll use my coffee cup. Thank you.